So we started this by looking at what Labour promised as their campaign in their election campaign of July last year under the message of change. Lots of things, indeed police officers are one of them, and we'll explore that one in a bit more detail with the Police and Crime Commissioner live on the programme after the news at midday today. But they promised 6,500 more teachers paid for by putting VAT on private school fees. Well, they've done the VAT bit, but the National Foundation for Education Research say that it's a now or never moment to hit that target of recruiting 6,500 new teachers in England by the end of this parliamentary term, which is 28 to 2029. And that's against the backdrop of already 6 teaching posts in every 1,000 left unfilled last year. Well, let's talk it through with Jack Worth, who is the workforce lead for the National Foundation for Educational Research. Jack, good morning.
Good morning.
So you've got two things going on here. Lack of teachers already, so there's holes in teaching posts. We've heard from one local head who's already told us that they're lucky sometimes if they get one applicant, let alone 2. And then we've got 6,500 more teachers on top of what we're supposed to have. Let's deal with the first one. Why do you think we've got so many vacancies?
Well, we've had long-running difficulty of attracting enough new teachers into teacher training, and part of that is because we've needed so many to replace the number of teachers leaving. Around 10% of teachers leave the state-funded sector every year. So there's been growing challenges, especially since the pandemic, of not recruiting enough teachers to meet the targets that the government sets itself in terms of the number of teachers needed to supply the system, and then that puts pressure on school leaders who are trying to fill those vacancies and sometimes find it tricky to fill those vacancies. So we've seen a rise in the number of unfilled vacancies, but also rising class sizes as classes are adapted to meet the staffing challenges, and also more teaching by non-specialist teachers, particularly in like maths and physics, where the recruitment challenges have been great.
So we've got a number of things going on here. Lack of teachers means larger classes, which makes it worse. We heard from one local head teacher earlier this hour who said that almost half of all teachers leave within 5 years of starting their classroom work. So there's clearly an issue with the job itself. And then we have a government who's promised, they had a political party, Labour, who promised 6,500 more teachers should they win. Well, they won. And I mean, they're not even treading water, let alone expanding.
No, absolutely. The current position is that it's getting worse the last couple of years. Now, if the government is able to deliver on that pledge, then that will make a real difference. Particularly if those 6,500 teachers are in those really difficult to recruit for subjects like maths and sciences and modern foreign languages, that school leaders will be struggling with the most.
So how are they going to do that? Sorry to interrupt you, Jack, but how are they going to do that? Because, if you've got the pay scale here, starting salary for a teacher until the 31st of August this year, so the current academic year, starting salary, minimum, 31,650. You get a bit more if you work in that there London. And then, if you're doing well and you're on the maximum upper pay range, £49,084 as a teacher. It can't just be money, because do you want teachers just doing it for the cash?
Well, absolutely. It's a range of things, and the government will need to put together a plan of how it plans to do that. And money at the spending review is likely to be crucial for that. Do the schools have the additional money to employ 6,500 more teachers? They will certainly need that. But also, is the profession attractive enough to attract in 6,500 more teachers? Because at the moment it isn't attractive enough to attract in the number of teachers that we need right now, let alone 6,500 more.
So what's going to make it more attractive then? If you've got, we heard again from that head teacher, if you go into teaching and you think, I'm going to be Mr. Chips, I'm going to be that teacher that inspires, I'm going to be, the Robin Williams character in Dead Poets Society, and then the pie chart this head teacher referred to was you spend half the time teaching and the other half doing paperwork, meeting targets, doing stuff that you'd never thought you'd have to do. There's more being put onto teachers, like brushing of teeth and special educational needs and disability, which is crippling both local authorities and, it appears, schools. There's so much going on here. The government aren't going to be able to sort all that out, are they?
Well, it's going to be a real challenge, absolutely. You're right. The number one reason why teachers say they're considering leaving, which was 30% last year, is workload, and that's a really key reason. Teachers work during term time. They work longer hours than other graduates in other jobs. They have to be on site, whereas graduates are kind of increasingly working hybrid or at home between the office. And workload is a real challenge because teachers spend a lot of time doing non-teaching tasks, many of which they would wish they were spending less time doing. And also increasingly since the pandemic, dealing with individual pupils' needs and their behaviour and their pastoral care. It's been a real burden on teachers to make sure that side.
So if I was Bridget Phillipson, if I was the Education Secretary, you would say to me what? First step, what do I need to do?
Well, I would say prioritise making the job of a teacher sustainable and manageable. But Bridget Phillipson also has a lot of other policy in play at the moment, some of which will affect teacher workload and teacher retention. So, for example, the curriculum review, is that likely to slim down the curriculum to make it more manageable for teachers, or actually is it going to change it all around and create more additional workload for teachers to actually respond to those changes and put those changes in place in terms of their lesson planning? So there's a lot of challenges there and trade-offs to make.
You're effectively saying uncertainty, and uncertainty is probably one of the biggest issues that's facing teaching at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of policy in play, and we don't know what that's going to end up looking like.
Okay.
There's a new Ofsted inspection framework as well, which is another key link to teachers' workload. So, absolutely.
Jack, thank you very much for joining me this morning on BBC Radio Bristol. Good to hear your views on this one. Jack Worth there, he is the workforce lead for the National Foundation for Educational Research.